Welcome to the Essentially You podcast, Dr. Naidoo. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Dr. Misa. Thank you so much for having me. It's
Oh
a
my
pleasure
gosh.
to be here.
Yay! I am so happy to have you. When I heard about your book and I heard about all of the amazing work that you did, I was so excited to have you come onto the show and share your brilliance. Today, we're talking about a topic that I love. I totally nerd out on, and that is the mood-food connection and how we're going to feed our brain to really not only feel better, but actually help boost our emotional capacity, which I think is just amazing. A lot of people don't put that together. They don't realize that what we eat has everything to do with how we feel. Now, Dr. Naidoo, what was the inspiration? What was the defining moment for you when you knew that this was the work you wanted to do in the world?
Thanks, Dr. Marisa. I think it came early for me, and it took years to evolve into this very complete idea of nutritional psychiatry. I first really was paying attention as a prescriber. As a young resident in psychiatry, I knew that medications I was learning to give my patients also had side effects, and I felt a certain responsibility around understanding the lifestyle changes and nutritional guidance I could give them if I was prescribing something that they may need at the time, but they also may develop side effects. And so I began to really pay attention to nutrition and lifestyle and other measures. And this really grew for me to become a more lively interest. And so when people say to me, how long has your clinic run? I actually say to them, I've been doing the work outside of forming the clinic for much longer. And that's really where it stemmed from, feeling that people should have information if they have medical conditions or mental health conditions, but may develop side effects.
That makes so much sense. Now, I know this is the area of focus that you have really just experienced a lot of groundbreaking research in. Can you define for us what is nutritional psychiatry? Because I have a feeling that most people didn't know there was a branch of psychiatry that focused on nutrition.
Absolutely. And Dr. Marisa, that is because it's a nascent field. It's newer. We've been doing it for a very long time. Some of my mentors have done, decades ago, did the trials on folate and how folate affected mood. So whether it's a supplement or whether you get that through food, although the trials at that time were on supplements. But, we've known about it for a long time. People have heard about omega-3 fatty acids and eating things like salmon and, antioxidants and blueberries. But the truth is we haven't put together the research. And I think that, one of the things to understand is that in nutrition, the information is changing often all of the time. But so I like to guide my patients around some really basic principles of not only how to eat, but important foods that they should be eating. And this field has really developed into a much more robust area of research and ongoing research, both from an epidemiological standpoint and from sort of hardcore science, with the most burgeoning research being around the gut microbiome. So nutritional psychiatry, to answer your question more succinctly, is working with someone to feel emotionally better using nutrition and nutritional strategies. So I would work with someone, from their dietary changes to things that they could tweak in how they're eating in order for them to feel better emotionally.
Now, when it comes to looking at nutritional psychiatry, and you said the first kind of set of research was really looking at nutrient deficiencies and looking to see if we could fill in those nutrient gaps, things like probably magnesium, folate, B vitamins, and I know there's a lot of other supplements that can really help to support our emotional well-being. When did we start to look at the food component? Because I know that it's one thing, and I am a major fan of supplementation. I find that so many women in particular, when it comes to the gut-brain connection, is that they are really deficient in multiple key nutrients that can impact their hormones, impact the way that their gut works, even their detox pathways. So I totally recognize that connection. But I also know that food, take a blueberry, for example, or even berries to begin with, is you're working with so much more than just the minerals and the vitamins. You're looking at the phytonutrients, you're looking at the fiber. There's so much more going on in a blueberry, that you can't find in a supplement. And so when you're looking at that, do you first start working with the nutrient deficiencies by running labs, or are you working in conjunction with maybe potentially nutrient deficiency supplementation and then even whole food nutrition at the same time?
So much of it is actually personalized depending on what the client might need.
Mm.
And so some people come in and we do need to run lab tests because we're working with their primary care physician and they've already been identified to have nutrient deficiencies. But others actually come in, just feel that they want to feel better. I call this subsyndromal, where they don't meet the set criteria in the DSM-4 TR criteria for, say, depression or anxiety, but they're not feeling good. They're functioning, they might be going to work, but they're just not feeling themselves. They're feeling super anxious, or they're getting through the day, but really quite depressed and down at night. And they're not at a point where they need a medication, so they're not so severely depressed, but they need some way to tweak things. And we might start with a really whole food, healthy diet, but really based on what they eat, what their meal plans have been like over, say, I try to have them track their food and explain their food, and then make a personalized plan based on that, with giving them the recipes, giving them the nutritional components they should add in. And it is individualized for different people because they might present with slightly different things as the first line of complaint with which they walk into the office.
So an example for that, just trying to think, because I absolutely, clearly we don't always just kind of hit that threshold of diagnosed depression or diagnosed anxiety.
Exactly.
Sometimes we're just overwhelmed. Sometimes we're just
Exactly.
stressed, and sometimes
right.
we're just feeling anxious and we're feeling fearful of whatever deadlines we've got going on. I think of women in particular, we just have so much on our plate and then it just tips
So
over.
true. Exactly.
When it comes to looking at an individual approach, even with someone just overall just not they're just in a funk.
Mm-hmm.
And it comes to nutritional tailoring, is it a focus to add in? Clearly, I think journaling and watching what someone eats is so important because most of us don't even know, especially snacking.
Often. That's
I
right.
have no
we
idea.
lose track of it.
You're just
Especially
like,
now, we lose track of it.
and I think
Exactly.
sometimes we don't even realize that counted. Like that little
Exactly.
Frappuccino, that counted.
Yes.
And so those things, so it's always, I think it's always so important to document. First things first, are you adding things in or are you taking away? Because I know there's a lot of foods that can be very inflammatory, not even just to the gut, but on a cellular level. And then a leaky gut leads to a leaky brain,
Absolutely.
So I'm just curious to see.
So you absolutely have that down. So I'm all about adding in foods and only eliminating foods if someone has an allergy or an actual intolerance to something. Because what I find is, since we base, and even the book is really based on using the gut microbiome and the brain gut axis to help someone feel better. What it comes down to is people feel less restricted, and studies have been done and shown that when individuals restrict in terms of a dietary plan, they tend to bounce back and boomerang and kind of do worse after that period of restricting a food. So I'd rather give them, on the front end, a lot of options that they can build into their diet while giving them guidelines around, processed foods, ultra processed foods. What are the hidden sugars in food? Many people don't realize, that savory foods have much more added sugar than you might think, the yogurt that you have that has fruit in it. So giving them clear guidelines, plus using things like healthy fats, how fiber impacts their gut. And where can they get that fiber from? Yes, your mom or your grandmother said, eat your vegetables, but there's a lot more science now that we know behind that. So giving them clear guidelines, telling them that this is the amount they can eat, often makes them feel better already, because they feel, you're not coming to your office and you're going to tell me, give up this, give up that. Within that, Dr. Mee said, there's also people who come in who might already have, an inflamed gut just because of the symptoms they're presenting with. Or they've seen their gastroenterologist who sends them to see me because they're suffering with a particular condition. And, as we decipher it, we realize that we can help the gut and therefore also help the anxiety.
Yeah, I would love for you to speak into, because that's where I see one of the biggest connections is the gut-brain connection in regards to anxiety. And
Absolutely.
I feel like, and you can speak to this better than I can, but I feel like the rate of anxiety is definitely increasing. And I don't know if that has to do with the amount of stress. I don't know if that has to do with I don't know if I know a patient who doesn't have some kind of gut distress. Um,
Absolutely. Uh, it,
we gas and bloating, it's become so normal, it's become so common, we
yeah,
just think that it's just kind of the way it is, and we don't realize that there's potential repercussions down the road when we're dealing with those types of symptomology. So speak to me a
exactly.
little bit about how the gut brain connection and what we eat can have such a positive impact on those feelings of anxiety.
Absolutely. So it starts off with, the actual gut-brain connection. I mean, people read about it in the news, they hear about it, and they speak about it in their doctor's office. But I think it's important for people to understand that there's an actual anatomical connection, because, people don't think that there's a connection other than being in the same body between the gut and the brain. But there's, from embryology and from as we develop from, a sperm and an egg and a zygote, and how all of our lives came to be, those organs all form from the same set of cells. And there's a specific nerve called the vagus nerve, which directly connects the brain to the gut and forms what often is called the second brain, which is all the nervous system in the gut called the enteric nervous system. Where that becomes really important is for any reason, if it's disrupted, one of the biggest disruptors of the gut microbiome is stress. Whatever the source of the stress, whatever the cause, right now we may be facing a shortage of a highly prescribed medication called sertraline, otherwise called Zoloft, because one of the insurance companies did a survey of the number of heightened prescriptions for depression and anxiety. And psychiatrists are actually facing this shortage of certain doses of Zoloft right now. And it's because we have become increasingly stressed with everything that's going on. And the stress disrupts the gut. The gut then becomes inflamed. It could become a leaky gut. So many different things could happen to it. But because of the vagus nerve, there's this bidirectional up and down communication, and neurochemicals are communicated between the brain and the gut. The other issue is that serotonin, the huge, the mood receptor, the happy receptor, most of the receptors for serotonin are actually in the gut. So when you think about that, if you're eating poorly or you're stressed and it's affecting your gut is disrupted, maybe it becomes leaky, maybe it's just inflamed, or all of those things together, serotonin is impacted. Therefore, your brain is impacted. Therefore, you may suddenly appear much more anxious. So the moment you can start to correct all of those issues, I will see patients really start to feel much calmer, much less stressed.
I love to hear that. I would love to guide the conversation a little bit into, my thought around nutritional psychiatry is the intention is that we are potentially trying a natural way in which to heal the body, where it's a root cause approach. To me,
Yes,
it sounds very much like that. And I think,
exactly.
a root cause approach is always the best approach when it comes to really, truly healing the body. When does medication come into play? Are there
Sure.
instances where medication may not even be necessary because we found out that it really was a gut issue more than it was anything else?
Absolutely. So instances where it may not mean, where a person may not need medication, take, for example, someone who came to see me, an older woman, and I say that only because she described herself that way. I didn't think she was old. But she came in and said, Dr. Naidoo, I'm quite an old woman, but I know that I have a problem with my gut. She had read one of my blogs or an article that appeared in, I think, the Wall Street Journal or something, but it was about the gut microbiome. And she said, I've been getting a lot of treatment because I need it for my severe asthma. And she had been hospitalized and taken a lot of antibiotics because those were life-saving. She had severe chest infections and she couldn't breathe. But I know that I'm not feeling myself. And so with her, she didn't need a medication. She was feeling somewhat down. She was feeling very anxious. But when we took a proper history, she'd really been in and out of the hospital on multiple antibiotic agents, which her doctor was recommending because she'd been so sick. So for her, it really was about de-stressing, the proper diet, including the right foods in her diet, getting better sleep, making sure that she did exercise and mindfulness. So it was a very much a finding the root cause, but also a very integrated and holistic approach to how she got better. And she didn't need medication. I also have some people, like I mentioned a little bit earlier, who don't meet the criteria, but they're not feeling great. And they do very well with these strategies because they can build them in. They find it so easy because we all have to eat, right? So it's very easy to incorporate foods and add these nutrients back into your diet. And then there are also individuals who are very sick. They're suicidal. And as a psychiatrist on mental health, we have to take those symptoms seriously. So with someone's acutely suicidal or severely depressed, or say they have a bipolar disorder and are manic or psychotic and have lost touch with reality, those individuals need a much stronger level of care, and they might need medications first to get them out of this acute phase. And as they start to recover, nutritional strategies can augment their recovery, their treatment, and actually really help them. So I think that in those individuals, we don't step in with the nutrition first. It could be adjunctive even at the time that they're sick, but it wouldn't be the first line to get them out of that episode.
Thank you so much for the clarification. I totally make so much sense to me. I wanted to segue back to gut-brain connection. I know there's a lot of people listening right now to this episode and listening to your expertise, and they're feeling like they're in a funk. And some of them are definitely struggling with anxiety and depression. And goodness knows, we've all been given a pretty big wallop the last 3 to 4 months, just trying to figure out the unknowns and dealing with the stressors of families coming home, just everything just being flipped on side of its head. And a lot of people have been on Instagram making all kinds of goodies. People are baking like never before. I was
exactly.
like, oh my goodness. And, we're just closer to our refrigerator and our pantry. And oftentimes, I know you probably know a lot about this, but there are definitely instances of emotional eating, right? That we're
Absolutely.
fulfilling an unmet need, whether
Absolutely.
we're feeling stressed or we're feeling anxious or we're feeling, for me, it used to be, I was always exhausted. I'm like, give me a little something to get me through the rest of this day.
Right.
And so in these instances, as we're kind of coming out of the fog of all of this, and I know people are trying to be a little bit more mindful, especially as they begin to realize that what they're eating does have an impact on how they feel. What are some foods, kind of your superfoods, that even if you didn't have a chance to look at that particular person's profile, but you just wanted to make some general recommendations about helping to support the gut microbiome, helping the gut get a little bit more probiotic driven foods, definitely fiber, a huge player in that, healthy fats, right?
Absolutely.
Those little bugs love themselves some avocado. And so talk to me about some of the superfoods that you just think are kind of a non-negotiable.
Exactly. So, given as long as someone doesn't have any kind of allergy, you won't be surprised. I'm going to start with all the greens, because the greens and the green vegetables and the cruciferous vegetables like the broccoli and the cauliflower and the Brussels sprouts, all of those have superfood ingredients for our gut, including the fact that there are so many vitamins, nutrients, and minerals in fresh vegetables that we probably can't enumerate them. Plus, they're rich in polyphenols, so all of these things are good for your gut. So I would say just start with the greens and then build your colorful vegetable plate from there. So I feel that it's probably a large category, but you can't avoid vegetables. You can't avoid whether you have them fresh, raw, cooked, steamed, however you do it. Just try not to fry them too often. That's obviously not healthy. But
that definitely defeats the purpose.
Exactly, it kind of undoes that purpose. But that's a good way to start. Like
I love it. I love it.
In a simple way, you can make a salad. We used to go into work, we have a salad bar, work at a company, whatever it is, on a hospital. But here's the thing, you can do that for much less money. You can do it so much easily at home. And here's the thing, you can't overdose on vegetables. You can eat a good amount until you feel full, and it's healthy food that's also helping your gut. So I start there. And then I build in the fact that you should have fruits unless you have some sort of carbohydrate intolerance, or you have to be careful about that, or have had a reaction. Then, fruit should actually be good. And I start with berries because those are my favorite, all the colors of berries. And remember, we're adding in colors. The brighter, the better. The more colors, the better for you. So variety and colors. And then, the natural sort of the prebiotics that are just going to help your gut along. To me, rather than go, at times supplements are completely fine in this instance, but if you can get it through food, Why not? Yogurt without active cultures. There are also non-dairy yogurts that are now building in active cultures for you. So if you don't have dairy for some reason, there are other options. Kefir, which is soured, just get the unsweetened type and then build it into your recipe. Have a delicious recipe for, who knew, a salad dressing made with kefir, but it gives you the creaminess, right? And then things like kimchi, which is a Korean pickle, sauerkraut, which are fermented foods, right? So part of those prebiotic foods that help our gut are the fermented foods. And then, I should also not mix up prebiotic and probiotic foods. So the prebiotics are the ones that actually feed the good guys in our gut. The probiotics are, what we need, the active cultures from yogurts and things like that. And all of these food lists you'll find in the book, and you will be able to actually refer to them because they kind of outlined for you in the clearest way. So pre and probiotics are also, for me, not negotiable. And then, I ask people to build in sources of protein that they like to eat. Some people are more plant-based these days, so build that in through your diet. Or if you eat everything and you eat meats and fish, then have lean poultry, have salmon, because the benefit of those can be built in through the omega-3s and the other nutrients. For example, vitamin B12, really you can only get from meat sources. Vegetarians and vegans do need to take a supplement for vitamin B12 because they don't get it from vegetables. They don't get enough. So, those are some building blocks that I give to people that, this is sort of the amount that you can have, guys, and pick from here. So it also makes them feel better about the choices they have.
I love it. I love when another practitioner comes onto the show and tells everybody to eat some greens. I love that so much. We are a big salad family and a green smoothie family. So we love our cruciferous vegetables. I just love those so much. Yes.
Dr. Musa, I meant to mention one thing, actually two things that just occurred to me. The one thing is it says, if you don't like your greens, put it in a smoothie. You just said it for me. If you're not a salad person, I understand, but have it somehow, put it in a smoothie. And the other category that I should have mentioned was my love for spices. Spices are calorie-free. If you buy the pure spice, they're salt-free. So, the blends tend to have salt added. So just be aware of that because of sodium. And you can make one type of food in multiple ways, and it's a totally different dish because of the different spices you're adding. Plus, they have huge benefits.
I love that. Brain. Yes, we love spices here in this house. And so thank you for that. The added flavor, the antioxidant count, and again, you're getting a lot of flavor without the added salt or without added preservatives, which I think are so, so important that you find in box foods or things like that.
Exactly.
You've given us so much to consider, and you have made it feel so simple. I know that there's a beautiful framework inside of your book. Can you tell us a little bit about, not only a little bit about the inspiration of the book, but a little bit about the book specifically?
Sure, thank you. So the inspiration for my book was really hearing from my patients that things were working, that we discovered meal plans and nutritional interventions that were helping them, and we were proving it through our clinical care. So I felt that this should be shared. And the way that I conceptualized the book was that there are all of these disorders in mental health, and we wanted to make it user-friendly for people. So someone might pick up the book because they have depression. Someone else might pick it up because they're not sleeping well. Someone else might pick it up because they're struggling a little bit with their memory, or someone in their family maybe they've noticed is having problems with their memory. So we've divided it up into 11 chapters, and 10 of the 11 chapters have the different diagnoses. What we've done is we've broken down, we looked at someone's probably upwards of between 700 to 800 scientific references. And I don't want to scare you. We whittled it down for you.
We love the
whittled
research.
It exactly. I'm not going to say you have to read it. So read the references. But what we did is we took those and we really took the over 500 that are the most relevant, and we put them into each chapter so that you are guided by what the research shows for that diagnosis and for that food. And I don't want to overstate this because in some instances, the evidence in terms of the amounts of food and should I eat an X amount of food is not quite there yet. but there are guidelines from science, from research, showing that certain things have worked. And why not try it? My philosophy around this is, if it's food, you are not likely to go that wrong with it unless you have an allergy or an intolerance. So if it's adding something in to try it out that's going to make you feel better, it's worth that. And we show you the science behind it. So then in each chapter, we break down foods to stay away from and the foods you should add in. And at the end of the book, we have a chapter on setting up your kitchen, grocery lists that you should be buying for living this lifestyle. And then some recipes, just recipes that are matched to each chapter. So, and you might intermix that. You might take recipes from the chapter for mood, and you might mix it up with the one from sleep. It's all interchangeable. But we used foods from the chapters to build the recipes. And I really hope it will be useful to people to just use as a guide, and thinking that, maybe they want to go to this chapter on sleep, but hey, maybe they also find some benefit from the other chapters too. So that's how we divided it up.
I love it. I love that it's so integrated, because you're absolutely correct. Many people have multiple symptoms, and they're looking to, get guidance on how to help, especially with sleep. Like, we know when people are feeling sleep deprived, that definitely affects their mood. And so I'm really excited that there's so much that we can interchange and take from it based on what's going on with us personally. It's like kind of having you inside of in a book,
Exactly.
And where can we find the book? Where would you like us to head on to grab this beautiful resource of yours?
Great. So it's at all major booksellers. It's on Amazon, it's online, but you can also go to my site, which is book.umanaidoomd.com, where you'll also find tons of fun stuff that you will get with the book too.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much. Thanks for letting us know. You got a little website. We can go check it out there. It's available everywhere. You guys, so many of us are dealing with anxiousness, mood, and we know people in our life that are dealing with it as well. And what if we could paint the picture for nutrition? So I highly recommend each of you go and grab this book, because it's going to be such a beautiful resource, not only for you, but those that you love. Dr. Uma Naidoo, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing your brilliance. And thank you so much for doing the groundbreaking work that really is going to shift the way that we approach mood and wellness and mental support.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mesa. It's an absolute pleasure to talk with you. And thank you for the wonderful questions and being so thoughtful about this.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for coming on.
Take care.